grab a seat? All right, we're going to get started.
Yep.
So if we have, I mean, we have a couple people there, so they're going to be kind of coming in, but
Yeah, that's fine.
that way we have enough time to get through everything. So. Cool. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to make sure we have enough time for you guys to ask all of your questions. But I'm glad that you guys are here. We get to talk about my favorite topic outside of the world of CrossFit, which is food. I'm so excited. So for those of you that don't know, Amy Goldsmith, she is not only a registered dietitian, but CrossFitter as well. I met Amy, God, 9-10 years ago, in that range. I've worked with her personally on my own nutrition. About 8 years. How old is Simon? Because it was right after I had Simon, right?
Yeah.
8 years, I guess. But I've worked with her as an athlete in different stages of my kind of competing years. I've worked with her as a woman as postpartum. How do I work through that? And, you know, this changes, right? And how we work through all that. And even now, like, even though it's been years and years of me now learning so much from her, and not just with being a female, but being a female athlete, I still have questions to this day. And so she's just a really good resource. When I first started working with her, we met regularly. I had a full nutrition plan. We had goals, specific things in terms of my training, what I was doing at that time and kind of my CrossFit career. And I was like super intense into like competing at that point. And so like, what did my nutrition look like compared to what it kind of looks like now, which is a little different. I'm just older and I don't train as hard and as often, right? So she's been through and works with people in all different stages. Now, not just CrossFit athletes, triathletes, lots of endurance athletes. And when I say athlete, I'm talking about you guys, like anyone who moves their body, right? Anyone who even wants to like fuel your Sunday afternoon hike, right? Like you're an athlete if you're moving your body in some way. So that's one thing that we're going to kind of talk about tonight is not just fueling yourself, but looking at yourself as an athlete and making sure that you're doing what you need to do to take care of your body. You only have one, right? And nutrition is such a fundamental thing that we need to make sure it's our responsibility to ourselves to take care of our body. And what we put in it is extremely important. And making sure that we're putting enough in it as well. Sometimes that is a very scary thing to do, to eat enough food to kind of fuel yourself. So I'm going to give Amy the floor. She's going to give us lots of information. Please do not be afraid to ask questions, speak up. Now is the time, and then once she gets through a little bit of information, we'll have an even more time just for like an open forum for you guys to kind of ask questions. Cool? Let's do it. Let's talk food.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm super happy to be here. I love the new space. I was a member of Odin eons ago, and then of course pandemic has kind of changed my schedule and things like that, but hopefully I will be back here soon. So it's just me and my lonesome in my basement, so it's wonderful to see so many faces. Today I want to talk about a lot of things. I have a couple of pieces of paper here really just to keep me organized, because I can talk about this for hours and I know you all want to get home. So I want to give you information, and I also want to give you plenty of time to ask questions. Before I start, it is, you know, January 1st is probably the most irritating time of the year for registered dietitians. I mean, we absolutely hate it. It is mass marketing of promises that really are not sustainable. So I was happy to come here and just really talk about day to day. What do our bodies need? We don't necessarily have to get up tomorrow and be a brand new person. We can be really happy with who we are. But what we're going to learn tonight, we're going to give you knowledge so that you can decide on your own what you need to fuel yourself a little bit more. So first and foremost, there's evidence that supports that adequate nutrition is responsible for focus, concentration, alertness, and mood. Okay? Lots of evidence. There's lots of evidence that says that inadequate nutrition is responsible for delayed decision making, stress, depression, and fatigue. Okay? So it is a very, very important thing to take a look at. And before we talk about what your specific needs are as an athlete, I want to kind of break it down a little bit and talk about our nervous system and our response. Because lots of times when I go and talk about sports nutrition and performance, we talk about pre-fuel, during, and post-fuel. We don't talk about the other 23, 22 hours, okay? So to understand, we all know what the nervous system is. I'm going to break it down a little bit. The nervous system is something that's responsible to process information and create an impulse or decision, right? And then it decides if something is safe or unsafe. It's kind of like we put our hand on a hot stove. Our brainstem recognizes, oh my gosh, that's hot, pull your hand away, right? We do that for every single thing, every single moment of the day. So if somebody starts to come into our personal space and we are not somebody who likes close talkers, we may recognize that as unsafe, right? And then we have a reaction where we go to fight or flight, freeze or collapse, that sort of thing. Nutrition also does the same thing. So if you are somebody who constantly undernourishes your body, your brainstem recognizes that as unsafe. And if you're unsafe, if your body recognizes that as unsafe, you're constantly going to be in that fight or flight or that freeze or collapse, right? We all know that. When you're in that fight or flight, I mean, the increased heart rate, that reaction, oh my God, I want to punch this person in the face, don't do it. Or I just want to remove myself, you know, those sorts of things, right? If you're in that freeze or that collapse, you kind of just don't know what to do, right? We have physiological responses to that. That's our gut-brain connection, right? And the physiological responses are not fun. Like when we feel safe, we're grounded, we're mindful, we feel like we have direction, right? We have all these positive things. We can look forward without feeling anxious. When we're in that fight or flight or that freeze or collapse, we have unstable, blood pressure. Maybe our blood pressure is very low, maybe it's very high. We might have GI issues. Sorry, dietitians talk about poop all the time. You're either constipated or you have diarrhea, or you have both, constantly. You may be dehydrated, you may not be sleeping. So I just want to lay that out there so that we all understand that nutrition is important for fueling our activity, but it is also the number one thing, and accompanied by sleep and water. That's also very important. Okay, so as athletes, you have different needs than somebody who is not an athlete. And like Allison said, if you move, you are an athlete. I can't tell you how many times I have people come to my office and they'll say, I'm training for a marathon, but my pace is at 11:30, so I'm not an athlete. I'm like, girl, if you are getting up and you are training for a marathon, you are an athlete. I don't care if you walk it, I don't care. You are an athlete, right? You're moving your body. So it's very important that you focus on very specific things. You want to focus on macronutrients. You want to focus on hydration, right? You want to focus on sleep, and you also want to focus on timing of meals. Timing is very, very important. When we look at like dietary guidelines, I mean, I hate this kind of stuff because it's created by, somebody in the government who does like a general display of what recommendations are. But I mean, I generally agree with them. The general person is recommended to have about 45 to 65% carbohydrates, about 10 to 25% protein. This is a general population, 20 to 35% fat, right? I can't believe I had to look at that. That is the general recommendations. When you are an athlete, depending on what type of sport or activity you do, the length of time, your height, your muscle, all those sorts of things, it gets a little bit more specific. I usually say for most of my athletes, we're never below that 45% for carbohydrates, most of the time up to 50. A lot of times my marathon triathletes, depending on how long they're going, could be at that 50 to 65%. And keep in mind, that is not just 50% of what I eat in a day, it's 50% of what your needs are. So I have a lot of people when I'm talking about needs, they're like, oh, I had this happen this morning. Oh, I do 50% of carbohydrates. And I was like, yes, but you are only eating 50% of your total calorie needs. So you're halfway to halfway, right? So it does make a difference of what your total calories are. From a protein perspective, I would say, it's dependent. Most athletes, I would say, really between 20 25%. It's really rare that I recommend for protein to be higher than that. That's also the nemesis I think a lot of dietitians kind of don't love. There's protein is kind of put on this very high like stand, and really we don't need as much as a lot of people are saying. I think the things that we like about protein, it makes us feel satiated, right? I mean, I do feel more satiated from chicken than I do from rice. I think all of us can kind of agree to that, right? But we don't really need as much as a lot of like influencers or like the non-scientific professionals are saying. And fat, we need fat. I'm older than a lot of you here, I can tell, or I feel like it. And back in the day when I was in college, everything was fat-free. Oh my God, it was like, that was the rage. And you know, they thought if you eat more fat, you'll gain weight. We utilize fat not only for our activity, but for so many other things in our body. I went to Virginia Tech, and during that fat-free phase, we were testing Olestra. So I don't know if anybody here is around my age and remembers that, but it was this magic product that you could put in food, and you know, you wouldn't digest the fat. The problem was it created anal leakage. So that is no longer on the market. So you know, it's like with everything, you kind of weigh the good with the bad, right? Okay, so when we think about macronutrients, we all kind of have an idea here. I think Odin does a really good job with, you know, giving basic information and really kind of modeling that. So your carbohydrates is the fuel that your brain really requires and is the most efficient at using. In, you know, the outside world where, you know, of the land of the internet, carbohydrates are really kind of viewed as, or talked about as bad and something that you shouldn't eat because it causes weight gain and that sort of thing. That's not necessarily true. If you do not have carbohydrates, you will die. People come to my office all the time and tell me they're on a no-carb diet. Once you get to know me, I'm a blunt, facetious person. I always walk up and start to take their blood pressure because they're obviously eating carbohydrates, right? Most people don't really know what types of foods provide carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, all of your grains, all of your fruits, all of your vegetables, some of your dairy, like your milk and your yogurt, right? Ice cream, that sort of thing. So that's your carbohydrates. They're very important. Protein is really used from a recovery process, and it also creates antibodies, and it also, like while you're sleeping, works on protein synthesis, so you can work on your muscular endurance, your muscular adaptation. You don't really use it that much, or really you don't want to be in a space where you're trying to use that for fuel because you're really in a dangerous position, regardless of what the keto diet says or not. And fat is really important because we do use that for energy, but also fat is responsible for our beautiful hair and our nails and regulating our body temperature. You know, when we took our coats, well, for those of you who were working out, you feel a little bit warmer than us, but when we came in here and I took my coat off, I, you know, initially felt very cold. I'm lucky that I was able to kind of regulate that temperature. So all three of those things are very important to have. If you do not eat enough, you are going to struggle. And with athletes, the number one thing that I find, believe it or not, is that I find that most of my athletes are not eating enough calories. Is anybody here surprised by that? Everybody in my office is. They feel like, holy moly, I cannot believe that you're telling me this, right? The other thing is we see that the macronutrients are inappropriate. I see so many athletes who maybe went to an online calculator, which I totally get, because you want to have that fast information. Or maybe they even work with a coach who is just kind of sharing their own experience without really a lot of evidence. And so they're not eating the right macronutrients. Their protein and their fat is too high, their carbohydrates are too low. A lot of my athletes are not drinking enough, but I love how many water bottles I see here actually, and food, I like that. The last thing is most of my athletes are not getting enough rest. So when I talk about those things, anybody here feel like they are missing on any of those types of things? I mean, I can tell you there's sometimes that I am too, even as a dietitian, right? Okay, so let's talk. There we go. I'm gonna kind of get up here and point at a couple things. So there's lots of diagnoses out there, and one of the things that I'm seeing a lot with my sports performance patients are something called RED-S. It's relative energy deficiency in sport. Has anybody here ever heard of that before? Okay, I know Allison has. If you are someone who is not eating enough, is an athlete, and experiences a loss of period and a disruption to bone health. So either you have osteopenia, or you have osteoporosis, or you've developed stress fractures, you may be diagnosed with RED-S. So you have to have that like kind of perfect trifecta. One of my thorns in my side is that I work with a lot of people who get referred to me, and I will notice if they're not eating enough, and if they're an athlete and they have a low heart rate in my office, I will send them to get an EKG. And I love all providers. I think they're wonderful. However, if a provider does not have experience with this, they may tell my patient, you've got an athlete heart. No. You should not have a low heart rate. If your heart rate is low, you are not eating enough. I do not want to ever see anybody in the 40s. Most of you should be above your 50s. I don't think that it's a compliment to have a low heart rate. It means that there's something that's not functioning in your body, right? If you're not eating enough, though, you don't necessarily have to just be diagnosed with RED-S. You can have all these other complications. So we'll start, I'm so short, we'll start here, metabolic, right? When you're not eating enough, your brain starts to feel like it's starving, right? Your brain recognizes that as unsafe. It's in fight or flight, right? It's in fight or flight, and it's saying, when am I going to get my next meal? It knows it's not getting its next meal soon, so it says, we need to learn how to live off of less calories, right? And this is what happens to a lot of those fad diets, like Atkins, which I guess isn't as popular anymore. But like I'm like showing my age, right? But any of those diets where you restrict, right? Yes, of course, you may have a weight loss because you're eating less calories at first, right? But then your brain starts to say, hey, we want to live, right? We want to keep moving. So where you may have had a resting metabolic number of 1,800, now it's saying, let's learn how to live on 1,600. Hey, let's learn how to live off of 1,400. And then all of a sudden, you're like, coming to my office, like, Amy, I do not know what's going on. I am working my tail off in the gym. I've even increased. I'm going 5 times a day, and I'm eating the exact same thing, and I got on the scale and I gained weight. That is what's happening, right? Next, we have hematological. You'll start to see deficiencies. It takes a while to see deficiencies because, again, our body is so resilient. You don't eat enough, your nourishment is going to go mostly to your organs, because if your organs die, you die, right? So again, our brain is very resilient. However, after long-standing malnutrition, you'll start to see maybe you have low iron. Vitamin D is one of the first things that I see because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. So remember back with that anal leakage days, lots of people had vitamin D deficiencies because they couldn't absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, right? And you'll start to see maybe changes like with your red blood cells or even like your white blood cells, right? White blood cells being low, again, could be due to malnutrition. Next thing, growth and development. I mean, you will see changes here. I'll tell you with my kids that I see, the number one thing that I see is they stop growing in height. And that's the biggest thing that they say for kids who really want to meet their growth potential from a height perspective, it's all about nutrition and genetics. Psychological. I mean, when you don't eat, right, your body feels unsafe. You feel like you're in fight or flight, right? Your body is hungry. What do you think your brain is thinking about all the time? Anybody have any ideas? Food, right? So you're driving down the road and you're like, gosh, it's so weird. The only thing I can see here is it's the restaurants. I can't see anything else, right? Or like you're looking at the clock and you're like, when can I get a snack? You know, you're in work, like, or what am I going to eat for dinner tonight? What am I going to have for my snack, right? But along with that, you're not fueling your body, you're not fueling your stomach, you're not creating serotonin, which is the mood hormone, right? And mood plummets. And when the mood plummets, you're more stressed and you're potentially even more depressed, right? Hard to get motivation, kind of feel like, oh, it's Groundhog Day again, you know, that sort of thing. And even anxious. Cardiovascular, low heart rate. I hate to see it. It is the number one thing that is missed in the doctor's office. It like really ticks me off. I'm constantly educating people about that. But it is not a fancy schmancy thing if you have low heart rate. I don't believe in that athlete's heart. Gastrointestinal, we talked about that. But something else to think about is somebody who really always feels bloated, right? There can be an emotional side to that, but also it could be due to dehydration and not a lot of fiber, right? So, I mean, that definitely can lay into that. And then immunological, I mean, you're always sick. Your kids come home from daycare, and even if you don't touch them or you're away from them, if you can get away with that, you're always getting sick. Or, you know, oh gosh, there's a COVID outbreak. I know I'm going to get it because I've had it multiple times. Strep throat, all those types of things. So not eating plays a role in all of those types of things. And going back to the red S, just because I have athletes here, back in the day, way a long time ago, when I was in high school, if you would get stress fractures, right, they would be all over the coaches back then, right? Like, oh, you're overtraining them, you're overtraining them. All the research shows it's nutrition, 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 nutrition. So I'm very lucky that I've been able to really talk, and Allison's helped me with this a lot, like talk to a lot of the ortho physicians here, and they're referring right away for the stress fractures now, which is so important.
Yeah, and I'll add on that too, like just on a different book. So this isn't always something that not everyone is trying to lose weight, not everyone
Right.
is trying to be in a deficit, not everyone is trying to just not eat enough food, right? Like I've been here not knowing.
Yeah.
Right? And like, especially when I after I had Simon and I was really hitting the gym hard and I had goals and I was training hard and I was competing and so we thought I was fueling enough, and over time, like TMI, but like there was a time where I lost my cycle. Well, that hormonal change is not good for an athlete, right? Like ladies, if you want gains, you gotta have a period. Right? Like physiologically, you need it. And so there was a time where that went away. And I was like, whoa, something's not right. Like,
Right.
Nobody knows. Like, we talked about it, and like I had to up my food, and I was eating way more food than what I thought. And now, like that is a maintenance for me.
Right.
Right? And there's other signs that like there was times where I wasn't sleeping well. I was like, okay, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm hungry. That's not normal. That's not okay. But you shouldn't have to wake up in the middle of the night and like eat a banana. At that point, like your body is so hungry, right? And so it's a lot of times I've had a lot of the conversations I've had with like you guys are just being in this world for so long. The conversation that we end up having is people are not meaning to do that. They're not
Right.
trying to underfuel a lot of times. It's just that a lot of people don't realize how much we should be really paying attention to that, and how not fueling for a really long period of time causes a lot of things where you don't realize that it's coming from the fact that you're not eating enough on a daily basis, right?
Right.
Like being grumpy all the time is not a normal thing, right? Being so quick to be irritated and have that like reaction, that is not a normal thing. And a lot of times, like she was saying, like your body's just so heightened and sometimes like for a lot of people, like for me during parts of my life, I wasn't feeling hungry either.
Right.
So like your stomach feeling hungry is not always necessarily a sign. Like there are these other signs that your body is telling you, like Amy was saying, that like your body adapts, and if it knows it's not getting enough food, it's just gonna stop giving you that hunger signal.
Right.
Like it's just gonna stop. And like some people say, like, well, I didn't eat because I'm not hungry. Well, there's all these other signs though, and a lot of times they have those signs. You might have some of those signs, and those are signs of not eating enough. Now, how much do you eat? And most people, it's eating more often. A lot of times, like throughout the day, and being more mindful of that, like is extremely helpful. But like, it's not always I'm trying to not eat enough food. It's like I can realize. So I'll tell you, just from years of like working with Amy and just being way more in tune with my body and what's happening, and get to a point where like you start to notice the signs. Like if I know, like I'll still have days where I'll wake up early in the morning and be like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. Like the first thing I need to do is eat breakfast. I know I didn't eat enough the day before.
Right.
If it's 5 a.m. and I am waking up because of hunger, not because I'm awake, I missed the day before. I didn't eat enough, is what it comes down to. So I'm just mindful the next day. Like, okay, I'm going to eat a really big breakfast, and I'm going to make sure that I'm getting food throughout the day. And like, this isn't true for everyone, but I have learned that for myself. If I don't eat every 2 to 3 hours, I can't focus. Like my work here, my brain starts to go places, right? Like there's certain signs. So just being more mindful of these signs and paying attention to your body and knowing that you need to feed it has been one of the biggest game changers for me. And I'll tell you what, as soon as we started really packing on the food, I mean, I was crushing it in the gym, I'm not gonna lie. And I saw the biggest gains, and I'm almost 40 and I'm still hitting PRs, right? Like, so the idea of, you know, as you get older, especially ladies, like there's this big misconception, like you can't get stronger as you get older, bullshit. But fuel it, right?
Yeah.
If you fuel it properly, your body will get stronger. And getting stronger means building more muscle. Building more muscle means that you're leaner, right? Like your body will change. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, there's a point there, right? Because our body, our brain is resilient. It knows it's not getting the food that it wants, so it might recognize that feeling of hunger is unsafe because you're not, you know, not going to be able to get that. So then it starts to ignore that, and I think that's the hardest thing of nutrition. Look, I'm going to be honest, as a dietitian, nutrition is a pain in the ass. Excuse my French, but you have to plan, you have to prep, and you have to have it available, and you have to have a commitment to it, right? I think that's the hardest thing. I don't question anybody's motivation when they come to my office. It's what is sustainable and what are you able to do, right? So when we talk about that, every one of you has a different form of sustainability. Some of you love to cook, and you're like, I want to prep all day Sunday and have my food for the week. Awesome. I think that is fabulous. I'm not one of those people. I used to love to cook. My kids are 15 and 14. They've destroyed that love for me. Maybe later, right? But I am very methodical about, you know, what my lunches are going to be. I have a service because it's easy for me and I deserve it right now in my life. I mean, I'm going to be 47 and I deserve somebody to deliver that to my door, right? And I have my dinners planned every single night, you know, all those sorts of things. So that's the first commitment is, do I feel like I need to fuel differently? And then what can I do that's sustainable, that doesn't make me feel like on day 10, this is so bad, I'm out, right? When we talk about what you need, we really are looking at least 3 meals, at least 2 to 3 snacks. And you're looking at timing, right? No athlete should really go longer than 4 hours without eating. Many of you, once you get your hunger cues again, will recognize like, hey, I might need something every 2 to 3 hours. And that is also different for everybody. Some people like to calorie count. Some people like to count exchanges. There are a million ways that you can do this. If you're working with the right person, they're going to compromise with you on what you like to do. I'm a visual person because, again, I'm old. Can we get to the next slide? Sorry. Sorry.
HR, IT tech.
Thank you. Okay. So this is, you know, you can find this online. This is kind of a starting point, a visual starting point of what everybody needs. So this is the...
I can post the link and everything for you guys too. Like, so if you can't quite see it right now, it's no big deal. I just didn't want to post it beforehand, but
yeah.
I'll send it to you guys.
And if we look at this, it's kind of strategic. The portions are strategic with the macronutrients based off of your needs, right? So if you look at this and you're like, I don't know what I am, easy training, moderate training, hard training, your coaches here will know, don't you think? So they will give you...
People in our world are in the
moderate, yeah, for sure.
Hard training, things like you are training for a marathon.
Yep. Yeah, they're hard training.
So live in that moderate world.
Yeah, so if you take a look at that, you can see the portions are kind of changed. So moderate, it's really a third, a third, a third. A third of your plate is grains, a third of your plate or a little bit more is vegetables, and then you've got the lean protein, right? You're getting that direct, the carbohydrates right from the grains and the vegetables. You're getting that protein that you need for the recovery. There's natural fat in our protein, even if it's lean. And then we want you to add fats as well, right? Because we do need fats. And fats give us texture and flavor. So about like 1 to 2 tablespoons with that. You can add another fruit, and then there is a drink here. I'm not going to be picky, but I love milk and I love cow milk. I feel like, this may not be a popular opinion, but I feel like almond milk is like a designer dud. It's sugar water with no protein in it. I mean, if you have an allergy, I get it. Otherwise, do not drink it. Coconut milk, coconut is saturated fat. Why are we adding coconut to our diet, right? The whole milk, or 2% or 1%, has the fat that you need to digest the calcium and vitamin D. Any woman over 40 who is with Allison and I, we naturally have a wonderful 1% decrease in our lean muscle mass. Our estrogen drops. We're wonderful to be around every month at a certain time, but we're at risk of having that calcium, vitamin D, the bone issues. So I would like for that to be a dairy. If we move to the hard training, you'll see that's where we really increase the grains a little bit more because we need carbohydrates. Rule of thumb with snacks is I usually say definitely at least a serving of a carbohydrate and protein. Add a fat for texture if you want. The way that you want to look at it is look at what your day looks like, right? So if you know, okay, I eat breakfast at 6:30. This is for a lot of my high school kids, actually. It's another thing that drives me crazy. I eat breakfast at 6 or 6:30, but I have the last lunch at 12:50. I'm like, oh, I'm like, you better be eating a snack and prep. If your teacher doesn't let you, I'm writing a note. But, right, look at your day, right, and then kind of backtrack. And you may notice, like, if I'm a 6 a.m.er for breakfast and I don't eat my lunch till 1, now wonder why I feel like I need coffee at 3. Do you really need coffee or do you need fuel, right? And so then you just backtrack and say, okay, it's not reasonable that I can eat before 1 o'clock for lunch, but then you add a snack, right? And same thing for the rest of the day. When you are working out, and then I'm done and I'm ready for questions, if you've had a full meal that looks similar to that, 2 hours before a workout that's an hour or less, you can be okay. If not, you need to fuel with a quick carbohydrate about 15 to 30 minutes before. A lot of people use those applesauce squeezies here, right? And that will get you through that hour, right? And then we want to have a replacement snack within 30 to 45 minutes after, or a meal. So if you're somebody who's able to get out of here and have your meal right after, good. We just want that meal to look like that, right? Otherwise, it's that carbohydrate protein combination. Okay?
And for those of you that have gone through our Roots program, like that's one of the conversations that we have. We even have that handout, Avoid the Bonk. Like that came from Amy, right? And so we talk about that. Some sort of carbohydrate before you work out. We always suggest some sort of fruit because it's easy, right? And your body will digest it well, right? So a piece of fruit, or that's why we have the applesauce in the fridge, right? To make it super simple. And then after, a lot of times we'll suggest like a single serve of yogurt or cottage cheese with, again, like a piece of fruit. Just makes it easy. So like, a yogurt and a banana and off you go. It's a really great post-workout. If you're not doing something like you can do a shake. I don't personally like shakes. I like to eat my food rather than drink my food. But if you're a shake person, you could do a protein shake and an apple. You'd be amazed at how good you feel doing that after the workout. But I have that sheet as well. I'll send it, or I'll put a little link to all of these, and I'll put a link to the sheet we call Avoiding the Bonk. The bonk being like you just bonk out, right?
Like you just want to get out of there.
We talk about it, and we can see it happening to you in class, right? You are on the rower, you're rocking and rolling, and all of a sudden we see you go, and you just tank, right? And we have before, like sometimes people will start to turn white, right? If you are turning white and a coach hands you an applesauce squeeze pouch, which we do on a regular basis, eat it. It's not an option. Like at this point, you are kind of a liability in your right? It's just, muscle growth, right? So if you're running out of fuel, you are like a car that's driving around on an empty gas tank and you're just burning up your engine, right?
And
you want to
then
be a sports car with a full tank,
right.
flying.
And then you're behind for the entire day, right? I mean, none of us, I wish this happened. Like, I wish I got done with my workout and I was like, rainbows and butterflies, the rest of the day is going to be fabulous. But no, I've got to troubleshoot, I've got to tweak things, I've got to get my son over here, I got to get my daughter over here. It is a stressful day, right? And if we're not fueled, we're allowing ourselves to stay in that fight or flight all day long. So we have all these other stressors coming on, plus we're malnourished. So if there's anything that you can take from this, yes, it is so important to focus on what you're eating pre and post, but the entire day is really important. And you don't have to have a new year, a new you. You don't have to buy products from the billion-dollar nutraceutical, world. You can just make small changes, right? Maybe your first small changes, hey, let me look and see what my day looks like. Do I have a lot of times where I eat more than 4 hours? Okay, that's the first thing I'm gonna do, right? And you make the small changes, and then you start to recognize, like, wow, I added a snack at 10 o'clock, like at 9:45, my stomach is starting to grumble. So then you get that reminder, that increases motivation, right? And then you go from there. So that's all I'm going to talk about right now. I want to make sure that I have questions, that I can answer questions, so everybody has.
So for older athletes,
Yes.
that continually recovering from injuries,
Yes.
how do you change your diet to improve your recovery from injury?
If you're somebody who has routine injuries, it's most likely related to not eating enough of overall calories, and then maybe looking at your calcium, your vitamin D, and that sort of thing, depending on what injury you're having. So the first thing to do.
Reconstructive shoulder surgery a week ago.
Oh gosh.
5 days.
Oh, that's a brutal. Yeah, surgery. I mean, think about this. And then as status post, a lot of people, I've had a lot of my college athletes will come back with their injuries, and they're like, my females specifically, just because of the diet culture world, are like, well, I'm not playing soccer, so I've decreased what I'm eating because I'm sedentary. And I tell them, you are burning just as much as you were with soccer trying to recover from this injury, right? So it's really upping that nourishment, focusing on the protein so that we're able to repair the muscle and that sort of thing, but not going over too much, right? Hydration is really, really important. And then, taking a look at your lab, seeing like, what did my calcium or my vitamin D look like? Sometimes you'll get the clear, like vitamin D is normal. I don't really like to see it at that beginning of the normal number. So I like to see it kind of midway. But I would probably up those calories. Yes.
Like in a lot of sports, you typically see like physical signs, like we were talking about signs that we could point out earlier, deficiencies or not eating enough. Do you see signs of like, how do you know, does your body tell you when you are eating too much protein? Like you're not utilizing it and it's not going into rebuilding or recovery?
Well, believe it or not, we don't really store protein. I think a lot of times people feel like it goes, that it goes right to the muscle. So we convert it to fat. So a lot of times if you're eating too much protein, you're not really building lean muscle mass, and you could be gaining weight, believe it or not. But I mean, I can tell you, if you're doing the 1 gram of protein per body weight, you're eating too much protein. That is a false little calculation that's out there. It really, I don't like to see anybody, I work in kilograms because, again, I'm old, that's how I was trained, but really I don't have anybody go over 2 grams per kilogram of body weight, and I would say most people, we start at like 1.5 grams. Does that help? Or per kilogram, yeah. Does that help? Yeah, so I mean, if you are concerned that you're eating too much protein too, like you also may never feel hungry, right? Because protein really kind of helps us feel satiated, so you never feel hungry. You might be constipated because a lot of times if you're not hungry, most of my people who eat too much protein aren't eating the fruits and vegetables that they need. But you could do a quick calculation and see, okay, where do I stand? But it is more harmful to eat more protein. The other thing we can see that's extreme, and I'm actually a little bit concerned about it because I've seen it a lot. In the last month, I've had 4 really young clients between the ages of 30 and 45. I mean, I'm 47, so I'm going to call 45 still young. I'm still young, right? And they've been referred to me from their primary care physicians because their kidneys are not looking great. So their blood pressure is all off, and their glomerular filtration rate, which tells us how effective their kidneys are, is really, really low. And for all of those patients, they were on a high protein diet. We were able to reduce the protein, increase the hydration, and within about 4 to 6 weeks, we were able to get that number back to normal. But your physician should be looking at that, but you might want to remind them. Good question. Yes. You're up. Yes.
So thanks for all of that information. That was really interesting. On the last slide, you mentioned.
Yes. The one before this? Do you want to see it?
No,
okay. Okay.
But when we were on the last
Yes.
slide, you mentioned that your body will correct for the amount of calories that you're intaking. So if you drop, then your body will just adjust to that. Mm-hmm. How do you correct that?
You can correct it, which is the first thing. So that's a great question. Did everybody hear that? Okay, because a lot of people come to my office and they've been told like, oh my God, I've destroyed my metabolism. And they're so scared. I'm like, look, I had 2 kids back to back at 16 months, my metabolism, you can change it, right? I mean, we changed so many of the people that I work with. It's drastically, yeah.
And I started working with Amy personally after I had Simon. It was shortly after.
Right.
And I wanted to get back to competing and
Right.
all these things, and how I wanted to make sure I did it safely.
Yep.
And so there are tests that can be done.
Yep.
One of them is called a resting metabolic rate test, which Amy does at her office. And it is a great test to see your resting metabolic rate. Like if you just laid in bed all day, how many calories would you just burn laying there? It's a really
Yeah.
interesting number to see.
Yeah.
But it gives you some other information too. But that number, you can change that number. One way you can change that number is by increasing your lean muscle mass.
Right.
As your muscle increases, you need to feed your body more. You have more of a monster to feed, right? And so it's been interesting over the past 8 years working with her. Mine has changed greatly.
Right.
To the point where the amount of food that I'm eating now, like, just to give you an idea, again, I'm an open book, so feel free to ask me questions anytime. And this doesn't mean that it applies for everyone. For me personally, like, when I first started working with Amy, I was probably eating around 2,000 calories. Right now, on a regular basis, 25 to 2,800.
Yeah.
If it's like a busy day. If I'm coaching like 3 classes in a day and I work out and I'm just kind of on my feet all day, yeah. Like
Yep.
I'm 5 feet.
And so the way that
So it comes from building muscle
Right.
over time. My metabolism has changed. So what I need in order to survive is more because I have more muscle over the years of training. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You can change it 100%.
And you also have to kind of train the brain, right? So it's like get the brain in that safe spot where it recognizes like, okay, I get it. I'm getting fuel. I'm getting fuel right before I'm going to be active. So I'm going to use this fuel instead of having to pull from my storage. And oh, okay, now I'm getting recovery. I can actively use this. And so if you're constantly at that like 3/4 of a tank to full, your brain is feeling more relaxed. And then you're able to use that fuel better. And that's what promotes that lean muscle mass. But like I saw you're like, when Allison was talking, I mean, it's work to eat 2,500 to 2,800 calorie, right? So, I mean, you're right. Like when you hear this, like, holy moly. But I will say, if you give it a couple weeks, it becomes, you got to give it a couple weeks and you got to give yourself grace. Like I'm going to have a day where I feel like, man, I was a rock star this work. And then the next day, oh, this was horrible. So, but once you get there and you're used to what it is, I mean, you don't even have to track food anymore. It's like.
I don't, and I did, there was a time
Yep.
that I did, and it was a wonderful learning tool. And if that's something that you haven't done before, I'm not saying that it is for everyone. I don't think that everyone should be in a world of tracking their food every single day of their life. But
Yeah.
using it as a learning tool
Yep.
to understand
Right.
I have a very good idea of what a meal looks like for me. It also makes it easier. So like Amy was talking about, like you don't want to have to like reinvent yourself every year. Like you shouldn't have to feel that way on January 1st. January 1st, like you just
It's a new day.
right? And so when you're like during the holidays or you're traveling, like Jason and I are going to Savannah this weekend, right? But when we're there, like because of the information of what I've learned over the years, I can go out to eat and I can order a meal and have a very good understanding as to what I'm eating, and that gives me a really good idea as to is it enough food, or like I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna eat some fucking nachos and it's gonna be but knowing that, right, like the next day, right, I have a really good idea as to like a well-balanced breakfast
Right.
that I could have the next morning. I'm not freaking out because I ate nachos the day before. Does that make sense? So like just having that information and tracking and is a very, very good learning tool in the beginning. But if you have an obsessive mind, you have to be careful of
Yep.
that because there are people that get in the world of obsession and
Yep.
weighing and all that. So you just have to, you can work with a professional and but it is a really, really great learning tool. But I will tell you too, you will find out a schedule for yourself. Again, open book. I eat breakfast at 7 a.m. and my breakfast is anywhere from 500 to Chloe. Eat your food.
Breakfast is the most important meal.
We crush breakfast in the morning. It's a big breakfast. And then, like, I'll come in, I'll coach the 9:15 class, and then I have a snack. My snack is usually around 10:30. Then I eat lunch around noon. I have an afternoon snack, right? You guys see me when I work out in class. What am I doing? I'm literally eating a bowl of oatmeal with fruit right before I
She
work
meant
out.
second breakfast.
Breakfast, right? And then I eat a big dinner, and I eat before bed. Who would have thought? I have a snack every night before bed, and I do not pass that. There are some nights where I'll eat dinner, and like 25 minutes later, I'm like, and I'm gonna go eat my snack.
Well, and think about it. You know, when we're talking about like weight and lean muscle mass and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't happen in a day, right? So everybody who gets on the scale, I mean, the only people who should be getting on the scale every single day are people who are struggling with kidney disease or have blood pressure issues. Otherwise, you might tell me your difference, and you may not have pooped. Big deal. I don't care. It's not statistically, it's giving me no information, right? I mean, everything happens over time. So like what Allison said, that's something else. Like, go out, enjoy the culture, the people, eat the food, and then the next day, like, all right, I'm going to up the fruits and veggies, and maybe I decrease my protein. You know, you have the power to make that change. And I think that's what the diet industry does such a poor job with modeling. It's like, do this or that. And if you do that, you're going to fail. There's no failure, you know, when it comes to making changes. You just have to be flexible, and once you have the knowledge, it becomes easier. Yes.
This is a very specific question.
Okay.
Geared towards women.
Okay.
With your female athletes,
Yes.
once they have gotten past the whole, like, if they come into you and don't have a menstrual cycle and they have eaten all that, do you alter their nutrition based on where they're at in their cycle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I look at all of those.
More information.
So I will look at all of, yeah, I'll look at all of those sorts of things. So I collaborate a lot with the physicians or any lab work that you are taking out or that you've gotten, and then we will look at, you know, what your cycle used to look like, what types of symptoms you're having, and then kind of focus in on, okay, at this time, this is what you need. I actually, believe it or not, recommend changes to exercise more than anything with this cycle than food. Like, food is really kind of more consistent. But I will tell you that is one of my most favorite things with my athletes. I'm so thrilled about this. I literally have a client that I worked with years ago. She was a collegiate athlete. We worked together, you know, for a couple of years. She just reached out to me from across the country, and it was like one of those people when I saw her email, you know, you see somebody's name and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, she's like, I don't know if you remember me. I'm like, of course I remember you. And she said, look, I really want to get pregnant and I can't. I've been to all of these fertility specialists and I haven't gotten my period. I was like, and she's like, you know me, you know, from a long time ago, let's meet. We're working virtual. I got everything. I was like, look, she's training for Boston, so we know she has a really high output. Made a couple changes. She's been to all of these fertility doctors. In 2 months, she got her period. And she's had it consistently. So it's just, I mean, not that I want to say, not boasting me, but it's just that the nutrition is so important, and the specialists are wonderful, but so many specialists don't ask. Like, they'll say, oh, I think you might have IBS. Don't eat gluten or dairy. But they never ask you if you even freaking eat it. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's a lot of kind of collaboration from that perspective. Yes.
So what do you use to decide what people should, like you said, like there's always calculators and, you know, people might go off of their own
Yes.
experience. Like, because I've been given
A million.
crazy
There's
numbers.
a million.
I mean, 175 grams of protein,
Yep.
you know, from like a very, you know,
Yep.
a CrossFit coach, nutrition counselor, and then macros, you know, calculators are always.
Right.
Right, so it's very.
So
unknown.
that's a good question. So I will be doing this for 24 years in a couple months. So I'm also a major science geek. Like I don't even like to say something unless I know that there's evidence to support it. Like also in my it's like a problem, even in my personal life. Oh, it's like my husband's like, oh my God. But so what I have and what I have every dietitian that I work with has is there's 4 different kind of calculations that have evidence, like Ayrton Jones, Harris Benedict, Mifflin, like a couple other ones that I look at. And then we're very specific with like activity factors and injury factors. I do all 4 of them, and then I kind of come up with an average from there. So I don't use just one. I am usually pretty correct. However, there are times when people have endocrine issues or they have like a chronic like disease or something else that they're going through, and that's when I would recommend that resting metabolic rate test that Allison says. It's you literally breathe through a tube. It tells you within 47 calories what your resting metabolic rate is. But my recommendations are usually, I don't usually start with it because it's a waste of money, because usually I'm pretty close to where you need to be. Yep. You know what? It varies, believe it or not. It varies most by the intensity of the activity, and then like maybe a little bit but with your height or your weight, right? But I would say usually, regardless of age, I keep the meals the same and I manipulate the snacks. Good question. Yes.
You said about athletes' heart being like a thing that you're not, you know.
I'm not fond of. Yeah.
But what about like the low blood pressure and then saying as well, like you're an athlete, huh?
That's a good question.
And then like, but you know, because it gets in the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having low blood pressure.
Yeah. So to be diagnosed with hypotension or low blood pressure, it has to be below 90 to 60, right? And that's when we're really kind of like, that's a kind of that, okay, I'm going to be thoughtful about this, right? But most likely when you're that low, you're having orthostatic hypotension, where like you stand up and whoo, you know. And believe it or not, the number one way to fix that is hydration and regulating your blood sugar, so carbs and hydration, right? But if you consistently have low blood pressure, the first thing I'm going to look at is, okay, how long has this been going on? But I'm also going to look at what your hydration intake is like. I'm going to look at what your sodium intake is like and what your fuel is like. You can manipulate blood pressure. Now, if it's very, very low, then we're going to want to do a little bit more digging from an autoimmune perspective, like you could have POTS or something like that. But I mean, if you have low blood pressure consistently and you don't feel well, and you are working with a provider who is saying, don't worry about it, but you are having symptoms, advocate for yourself. Don't take, maybe that's not the right provider for you. Again, not saying anything bad about them, but if you're saying like, yeah, I have low blood pressure and every single time I stand up, I feel like I'm gonna pass out, or 10 minutes into a workout, I'm dizzy, that is a problem, regardless of what that provider says. So I would suggest like advocate for yourself, or if you need help advocating, work with a provider who will advocate, and then you'll be good to go.
What if you don't have any of those symptoms though, but you have low blood pressure all the time?
If it's not
Or
below,
like you just are out of breath, you know, easily, maybe is like the only symptom you ever notice.
so if it's not below that 90 to 60, but you're always like 118 over, I don't know, like 63, that may just be your normal, right? But if you are out of breath, then we also want to look at iron. You know, there's so many things. So you want to be working with a provider who's going to be able to look at that everything from a comprehensive perspective. Yeah. Yes.
What does the evidence say about a vegetarian or pescatarian lifestyle?
I mean, I feel like if that's what you want to do, that's great, right? I think it's a little bit harder to get to your protein needs, but it's not impossible. It just takes a little bit more planning and prepping. I'm not against it. I think there's like new things that are coming out that say like it's not the greatest, but if you are looking at what your total, especially if you're a pescatarian, there's ways to get the protein that you need. I think the problem is that diet culture thinks we need more protein than we need, right? So they think vegetarian, pescatarian, oh my gosh, you know, I'm not really, I haven't worked with an athlete yet that we haven't been able to meet goals. Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
You mentioned metal fruit and all kind of stuff. I was always taught avoid an insulin spike. So lactose, sugar, fruit, all that kind of stuff. From a lean mass perspective, are we not concerned about that? Or
No, I mean, those are kind of like buzzwords that I think are used to kind of sell something or market something. Like if you don't have a specific diagnosed disease of type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, or pre-diabetes, then your body is functioning appropriately. So or PCOS, which males don't have, but you know, we can trust, because we talked about how resilient our body is. We eat fuel, right? And then our pancreas really secretes what it needs. So I'm not really a fan of like all the stuff out there. I think that if you have a specific diagnosis, then we would look at it, but then that's a very easy fix. You just kind of look at the portioning and that sort of thing. You do not have to worry about that. Yep. Yes. Yes. Yeah, water, I mean, I'm a huge fan of water. I also think it's boring for some people, right? I mean, minimum, we're looking at 64 ounces. If you're a big sweater, minimum is about 80 ounces. I usually say the easiest way to gauge it is to look and smell your pee, which, not that you have to like get down and smell it, but if you are using the bathroom and there's an odor to your pee and it is a little bit darker, you're not drinking enough, right? And if that's the case, maybe you have to look at increasing your water or adding electrolyte. But I mean, if you're not drinking enough water, right, then again, our body is gonna feel unsafe. Our body is terrible at telling us that we're dehydrated, so it may tell us that we're hungry first. And sometimes that's where people have that like bottomless pit. Kind of think about like when you're really hungover, you drank more than you need, and you're like, oh, I want McDonald's and I want pizza. It's like, the reason why you have all those cravings is because you're dehydrated, right? So, does that help? Yeah.
Look and smell, and then you said a little bit darker, but a little bit darker than what?
We want it to be like the color of like a banana, like almost like the Death Mountain. Almost like the mountain on your, like, yeah, yep. Yep. If it's the color of your hat, we're really, really worried. Yeah. All right. All right. All right. I know everybody's got to get out of here, so I really appreciate all the questions and all the time. Allison's going to send everything out. Yeah. Small changes, sustainable.
Mm-hmm. Nutrition is the foundation, it is the basis for everything, right? So like if on that pyramid, it is nutrition, Right? So if you're struggling with that, or if you need ideas for snacks, or you can be like, hey coach, I tried this, but it upset my stomach. A lot of times we hear that with like eating before you work out. I tried this. I'll tell you why I can't eat a banana before a workout. It gives me heartburn. Okay, I learned that through trial and error, so I don't do bananas before. Okay, so if you're struggling with things like that, like come and talk to us. That is what we are here for, and we can help you with that. But yeah, it's crucial. So thank you, Amy.
Thank you. Hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever.